Chinese President Xi Jinping met with the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, last week in Beijing. President Xi made 4 observations on relations with the European Union, such as focusing on the right perception, properly managing differences, seeking deeper cooperation, and better managing international affairs. Will there be more clarity in the EU's China approach and vice versa? President Xi quoted an ancient Chinese saying to better describe China's position on the Ukraine crisis. What exactly did he say? I spoke to Michele Geraci, a former Undersecretary of State at the Italian Ministry of Economic Development, joining me from Rome, Italy. Also from Rome, Italy, Daniel Gros, the Director of the Center for European Policy Studies, and from Beijing, Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. Well, during the meeting, they did discuss and exchange views on the Ukraine crisis, and President Xi talked about China's position and principles once again, and he quoted a traditional Chinese saying, which is 城门失火，殃及池鱼. So, Michele, I know your Chinese is very good, but still, for those who don't understand Chinese, this roughly translates into if there's a fire at the city gate, the fish in the pond will suffer as well, because normally there's, a river help guarding the city close next to the city gate. And he talked about using political ways to resolve the Ukraine crisis is a common interest that fits Europe's interest as well as countries on the Eurasian continent. Why do you think he mentions this particular saying? How do you read into it?
I think there is a general philosophy that we in Europe are little by little understanding about Chinese attitude to this international crisis. One is based on the principle of non-interference, even when there are a crisis like the Ukrainian war. So China is trying to maintain this kind of neutral approach, not condemning, neither trying to work for peace. And little by little, I think the role of China may become important, because it is probably the fact that China has not clearly taken sides that it allows China to be a credible mediator between the two sides. Of course, if you are a strong supporter of one, it's very hard to be perceived by the other as a reliable mediator. So that's why we have China trying to play a role and cool down things. We even have the Vatican, the Pope, of course, and all the religious leaders try to work for peace. I think the message is also aimed at saying, you guys in Europe, be careful that you may get hurt more than what you think you will, because maybe the economic impact on Europe is underestimated. Maybe the popular support within the European population for the Ukrainian help, for helping Ukraine, is kind of diminishing, not because people don't support the Ukrainian, but because they realize that after almost 1 year of war, the situation has not changed, and people are paying the price. High gas prices, exporters do not do business with Russia, especially my Italian fashion, food and beverages that are cut off from the export market. No one compensates them. General average people need to keep, now we have a law in Italy, you cannot keep more than 19 degrees in home and offices. And so I think this is the way we could interpret the message of the fish and the gate, because it is people who are closer who get hurt. China, politely, Xi Jinping basically told Michel, we are 8,000 kilometers away, just like there are other 45 wars, thousands of kilometers away from Europe that you do not feel. But this one, you guys be careful, because I think Europe, the European Union, is playing a very difficult game, because we really never had this experience of war at our doorsteps. Let's be careful and do not put wood into the fire.
Just now, you talk about the European expectation for China to help end this war, and I've heard that, from various sources. Mr. Gros, I'm going to go back to you. How is this message going to go down, according to your estimate? Because the Europeans seem to have this idea that China plays a crucial role in helping end this war, whereas China believes the key lies in, European countries, because you are precisely where the situation, as Michele just said, China is 8,000 kilometers away. So in this readout between the meeting between President Xi and Mr. Michel, China actually says it supports the European Union to play a bigger role at mediating in the crisis and establish a balanced, effective, and sustainable European security framework. What is your thoughts?
Mediation is very difficult for the European Union in this context because this is an emotional, a fundamental issue for the European Union. The European Union was built on the assumption that you have peace, that you do not change frontiers with military force, that you do not invade your neighbors. That was the entire project of the EU. It terminated this idea between France and Germany. And therefore, it just cannot mediate impartially between Ukraine and Russia without betraying its own principles. And that's why somebody who's 8,000 kilometers away is perhaps much more qualified to be disengaged, to be looking at realpolitik.
Mr. Cui, it seems that we are, talking two lines. We are on two pages here. China believes in this way, and Europeans believing another solution, another approach. So, is it going to help for these kind of exchanges? Because there have been several meetings, and every time. Meetings between China and European leaders, every time this issue is raised, different aspects, of course, were talked about. For instance, last time during the meeting between President Xi and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, China talked about not supporting the use of nuclear weapons. This time, China used this saying. So is it helpful? Are both sides getting closer to towards each other?
If we look at the more than 40 years, or even this year, more than 50 years experience for China-EU relations, always to take some more mutual benefits from a difference is one of the golden rule for this cooperation. Because at the very beginning, we are different. So now I think the question is, the key issue is, there will be some challenges to the mutual perception, to the political agenda between two sides. But it's not means that both sides should give up their efforts to keep the communication. I think that now we are facing more and more difficulties and challenges. The real reason is not we are far away from each other, just like more than thousands of kilometers. The bigger reason is we are closer and closer than before because of the rise of China and China as the bigger power in the world stage, and also European Union side itself try to take some more, as we know, geopolitical functions. So I think it gives maybe a new format for both sides to get along with each other by building up a new mutual perception. For example, how about China and Europe? Now we have a so big volume of trade. So now it's the question for some European people say that, oh, it's time to reduce our dependency on China. No, it's not an answer for the question. The answer for the question or issue would be that, yes, now we are interdependence. So now it's a question, or so it's time for us to manage our relations and to promote some more, mutual benefits.
Mr. Gros, I'm going to ask this question to wrap up. It seems a little bit distant from the topics we talk about, but does Europe really, without having a clear idea, not yet a clear approach, a unified approach on China, does Europe have a clear idea about what kind of relationship it wants to have with the United States? And in terms of a multilateral world, does European institutions envisage Europe as one of the potential pillars?
Yes, that is one of the permanent illusions in Brussels, that somehow the European Union as one unified actor could have a relationship as between peers with the United States, because our economies are of similar size. But they forget that there's more to a superpower than having a large economy. And you have to be politically unified, you have to have a strong military, you have to have a security apparatus, all that Europe does not have. It is constructing it very slowly. Perhaps in 20 years it will be different. But right now I would say Europe doesn't really have a unified position towards the United States. It is starting to construct the basis for a more unified position towards China. But is it at the very beginning? It will take a long time before that materializes.
Many thanks to Michele Geraci, Gros, and Cui Hongjian. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Lu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Lu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thanks for watching. You've got the point.